We will start in a few minutes, just waiting for people to join in. All right, well, good morning. Today starts the second day of these challenge webinars where we bring you a group of folks, challenge stakeholders that will be able to take you through and guide you through what the different challenges are about. So yesterday we started with our introductory webinar speaking about the program as well as challenge 1. Today we move into challenge 2, followed by challenge 3 in the next hour. So today, again, we will have a different challenge chair with different challenge stakeholders representing different coalition forces. So thank you very much for joining. We are truly excited to have everyone online and all the companies that have registered and are considering participation in this accelerator and challenge as well. I know everyone's used to using Zoom already since everyone's pretty much been locked up at home for the past few months, but just some quick overview of functionalities for Zoom that we will be using today for these webinars. Top right, if you would like to see speaker view or gallery view, depending on how you would like to see folks come through. Obviously, you can click on that. By clicking the speaker view, it only focuses on the person who's speaking. By clicking gallery view, you'll be able to see everyone who will have their cameras and mics available. Down below, we have a Q&A function. So if you kind of hover towards the bottom of your screen, you will see a Q&A button. In there is where we will be asking you to type in your questions that we will then pose to the panelists during the Q&A section at the end of the webinar. The format for today is we're probably going to have about 45 minutes of discussion followed by 15 to 20 minutes of Q&A. So we encourage all participants who have a question to please put in your questions in the Q&A, and we will do our best to answer all the questions during the Q&A function. Of course, if we do not answer all questions, we will do our best to then follow up with getting those answers. So with that, I will turn it over to Captain Jake Singleton, and he will start us off.
Thank you, Brandon. We're really excited about today. We have a range of stakeholders from several different organizations inside the US and UK that have different perspectives, experiences related to this challenge. But what's most important is that they are close to these challenges. And that couldn't be more important for companies that are developing emerging solutions that are relevant to them. So the opportunity today is to hear from them some additional insights as they introduce this challenge, focused on our field operators, bringing that kind of tactical end user perspective. Companies that are interested or after hearing these inputs today realize that they are developing solutions relevant to those challenges and that they can solve those problems. We're really excited about these. We want you to submit proposals in through the DASA competition that you can find through the website online. Companies with relevant, desirable solutions there will be invited to pitch at International Space Pitch Day this November, with the opportunity to walk away from those pitches with same-day contracts on behalf of the US Air Force, Space Force, and the UK Ministry of Defense. So, excited to hear from everyone today, to answer some of your questions. Please tune in for webinars in the coming weeks, and we're excited to work with everybody. With that, we'll turn it over to Lieutenant Colonel Chaseman.
Good afternoon, everyone. I seem to be having camera problems here. Can anyone see me? I can't see myself. It looks very dark in my room at the moment.
I cannot see your video, sir.
Okay, but you can hear me.
Yes, sir.
Happy days. Well, I'm just going to fight through as we do best. And I think what I want to start off with is by actually going through the challenge itself. It looks like my system is struggling a little bit with Zoom today. Right, on to challenge 2, and that is, allow me to read it out, is a visualization tool for a commander in the field to understand satellite systems relevant to their operation. And the narrative certainly as follows. As the commander of a military unit conducting an operation against a technically sophisticated adversary, I want to visualize and understand what space-based systems, be they friendly, adversary, and third-party commercial, are operating over the area, as well as the services and support they are providing my operation. And this will allow me to articulate what services I need as a priority, such as that the allocation of satellite services can be prioritized within a multinational architecture. And this will improve my ability to make informed decisions regarding when and how the force should move and communicate. So what I'm going to do, I've got a series of chairs here. So I am the chair. I've got a series of panel here, and I'm going to go blind because my screen has gone blank now. But so rather than allow me to, I certainly have bios from each of them, but as I now cannot see them, what I'd like to do is just ask the panels as you go, hopefully in screen view, if you'd just like to come forward, give me a quick 1 minute from each of you of your background and what you hope to get out of today's webinar.
Okay, shall I kick that off? Because I think I'm on the left. My name's Lieutenant Colonel Sean Lamb. I'm from the UK Strategic Command. I currently work within an organisation called the Joint User, and the Joint User is responsible for sort of trying to cohere the requirement associated with future products. And my title is related to future and space. So these are the areas that I cover off. I'll pause there.
Good morning. My name is Tony DeCarbo. I'm the technical advisor to the Combined Force Space Component Command here at Vandenberg Air Force Base. CFSIC, the Combined Force Space Component Command, is one of 2 components of United States Space Command, the other component being the Joint Task Force or Space Defense. The CFSIC mission is to plan, integrate, conduct, and assess global space operations to deliver combat-relevant space capabilities to combatant commanders, coalition partners, a joint force, and a nation and the globe overall. We conduct our operations through the Combined Space Operations Center, or CSPOC, you probably have heard of. So that's a little background on who I am and what I'm doing here. So I look forward to participating in the panel and going forward. Thanks.
Good morning, good afternoon. Hopefully you can hear me all right. Lieutenant Colonel Luke Thompson, Royal Marines. So my job essentially is working within Naval Command, where I am the SO1 Maritime Capabilities Development Information Warfare, as I said, SO1. So my job essentially is to develop concepts across the IW, C5, ISR, EW, CEMA, the breadth of those functional and capability areas. To then take those concepts, develop them, looking at this kind of 2 to 5 year horizon, and then basically develop that concept to then give to delivery teams to then develop. So very much in a cap and acquisition space. My experience today is very much across the cyber, intelligence, EW space, with very much a grounding in commando infantry, so combat infantry. What I'm looking forward to get out of this is really some good discussion and to develop my horizons in this environment as well. Thank you.
Oh, so I'll jump in there. So good afternoon, good morning. Flight Lieutenant Mark Platt from Air Command. So I work as a staff officer in air capability, particularly in space capability development. So our responsibilities are looking out to 5-10 year horizons for the capabilities that are going to be important to the Air Force in particular, but also wider across defence, and supporting our frontline space operators in the UK Space Operations Centre, the UK SPOC, here at RAF High Wycombe, and also our tactical radar, our radar operators up at RAF Allendales on the ballistic missile early warning system.
And jumping next, Major Mitch Belger, currently assigned to the Spacecom IPE to EUCOM, supporting EUCOM, NATO, and AFRICOM at the time. Our overall mission is to integrate, plan, and educate all three of those staffs into what Spacecom or Space Command is currently doing, and what we can bring to the fight, and how we can best integrate the new Space Force Space Command that just stood up into their current operating systems.
Good morning, I'm Colonel Miller Belmont, 75th Innovation Command, Army Reservist. In the reserve capacity, I run a team of Army Space Operations officers and aerospace engineers. Our function is to bring technology to the warfighter faster than we currently do it. And we also serve as tech scouts. On my civilian capacity, I'm the Director of Experimentation for the Space and Missile Center of Excellence for the Army, mostly fielding new technology across the Valley of Death, from prototype through the field trials until it transitions to a PM or a program executive office.
Great, I think that's everyone.
Right, well, forgive me. I believe you can actually now see me, although I still can't see you guys. So thank you very much for that. And I hope you can all see sort of a real breadth of people within certainly space and across the actual land domain itself. What I'd like to do now is just go through each of the panel members, maximum of 5 minutes, please. If you can just give a quick introduction to the challenge from your perspective. Mark, can you go first?
Thanks, Colonel. Well, good afternoon. Thanks for coming to me first. So I get to steal everybody else's sandwiches. So yeah, I'm going to look at this probably from a component and liaison perspective, given my experience and my background working as an air liaison element to a ground component. And I suppose it's analogous between a air component or a space component liaison, because a similar sort of discussions would be had. And the role that you have as the component liaison is to provide the supported command, in this case the land command, with the understanding of what capabilities are being provided, what's available to them that they can make use of, so that when they draw up their campaign plan or whatever plans they're doing, that they can make use of and incorporate them. And the reason I bring this up is because when you work in the component headquarters, if, for example, I was saying as an air component, I was trying to explain to the brigadier or whomever's in charge as to why something isn't available, which they really want available now, the first question they ask is why, followed quickly by how long is it going to be until it's back? And so the visualization that we're talking about here is probably going part and parcel as to what would enable us to have that conversation. So the best liaison elements are ones that are able to articulate that clearly in a fashion which the component commander can understand and can appreciate and can incorporate that into their plan. And certainly the experience that I've had is that, generally speaking, intercomponent frictions are most present when that isn't articulated correctly, or when why something isn't available isn't particularly apparent. And I think that would be particularly clear in the space domain from space capabilities, because it's not immediately obvious why something can or cannot be done to the land component commander. So anything that can help to smooth that process and to clearly show what is available and why, and then allows the commander the choices that they need to make their campaign plans and what have you moving forwards. So that's probably the main focus that I have on it from here. But obviously it goes wider to the coalition components as well, and how you might interact with other components or other coalition partners in wider fields, wider areas of interest and activity. So it's probably enough for me for now. So I'll hand it back to you, Colonel.
Thank you, Mark. If we can go to Tony now, please.
Thank you, Colonel. So when I went the initial introduction, I talked about what CIV6's mission is to provide space capabilities, obviously. So looking at it from two perspectives, our previous deputy commander, Brigadier General Wolf Davidson, was a special operator. Our current deputy commander, Brigadier General Mike Connolly, is also a special operator. And I bring that up because of having those two individuals really drive a lot of the, last year was a CDD, the Combat Development Division on rapid development of capabilities. Driving those types of capabilities, it keeps us grounded, not just thinking, hey, we have to provide missile warning, position navigation, timing, satellite communications, etc., but actually from the perspective of the ground operator, the person in the field, the boots on the ground, if you will. So yesterday in our first Space Pitch Day, we talked about our first webinar, excuse me, we talked about bringing in different types of data to have a common operation picture or a visualization tool that could be modified or tailored to any level. And this is probably the ultimate extension of that, because I know that when you're on the ground, and Colonel, you can jump in any time to correct me, when you're on the ground, you don't need to have a whole lot of all the information about what's going on around the globe as we would in the operations center back at the CSPOC. You need to know what assets are available. If you lose an asset, what could be available. You need to know what's dependable and what you can rely on to plan your operations. Not only that, but to conduct your operations and to make sure that you achieve the objectives you're after. Over.
Thank you, Tony. And bouncing back across the Atlantic, Luke.
Okay, thank you very much, Jim, for bringing me in. I'll just talk a couple of minutes about the challenge first off, and then a couple of key themes that I'd like to bring out on the environment and specifically how technology can improve the ground commanders' situational awareness and mission planning. Firstly, the challenge itself about exploiting visualization tools for ISR and the breadth of space-based capabilities. It's really two things. Firstly, it's to understand what's available, which we brought out. But secondly, probably more importantly, is about how to exploit them. Second part is really important to maintain, and then we've just heard that that is exactly right. Looking at how these capabilities affect the ground commander. But what we've learned in the last 15 years of operational experience would perhaps suggest that those organizations, those units, those individuals that best jump on these capabilities, these different capabilities that can give you different effects, we noticed there was a huge increase in performance of those units. And this goes beyond just technology. This goes beyond just the widget or the battle management tool. It is the ability to tenaciously use these capabilities in mission planning and mission execution, which is absolutely critical. And that was very evident in the performance of battle groups, tactical units, which is really important. But it's important to understand the end user requirements, and even in the ground domain or in a maritime environment, the littoral, there are a number of different users with different objectives in this space. So a divisional headquarters that has I think Mark mentioned about an air component command would want to be able to synchronize and resource those capabilities. From a tactical perspective, so brigade down to battle group level, down to individual level, you'd want to harness those effects and be able to employ them in near real time or in also mission planning. So there's very many different user cases across the spectrum of conflict that would actually use these space-based technologies, and how they were used them would differ. But what we're finding, looking at the environment and the current environment of the battlefield today and tomorrow, is that we know from our doctrine it's going to be congested, cluttered, contested, connected, and constrained. But what does that mean? What does it mean is that there's going to be enormous pressure for the ground commander and stresses on he or she to be able to make decisions and make correct decisions. But there are two realities that we are facing, and we've learned this over the last 15, 20 years, is that perhaps we are becoming situationally less aware. And it's important for technology development. What I mean by that is, with all the information, a deluge of capabilities, knowing cognitively that the human brain can only assess 7 bits of information at any one time, we've got to be very specific on the information exchange requirements, i.e. what the user actually needs. And secondly, what we also know is that doctrine doesn't necessarily survive contact with operations. And what I mean by that is we plan for capabilities to be held at certain levels, air component command level, a divisional level perhaps. But what experience has taught us is that these would always be pushed down to the tactical commander as best we can to allow them to fight the fight. The issue with that is that you then become, again, situationally unaware with these capabilities. So we've got to be very, very careful in what we and how we push these down to our ships and to our ground combatants. In the question, it mentions about move and communicate and how technology can help this process, but it's very much more than that. It is more than just move and communicate. It's how we integrate this domain into our planning and our processes to fully exploit the breadth of these capabilities, whatever that may be, SIGINT, IMINT, IO, etc., whatever it may be. So it's more than just the move and communicate. And as the space domain increases in complexity and capabilities, we will be relying on that significantly more, and no doubt exponentially as well. So that's a critical aspect. And finally, looking at the problem, technology can certainly solve, or at least attempt to solve this problem by giving us the capabilities from a kind of end-to-end process. So looking at the visualization aspect of it, but also recognizing that that is one part of the chain to deliver these in a multi-domain integrated environment. So we're at a juncture here where understanding the end user requirements and having that almost baked into the solution or a part of the solution will hopefully solve some of the problems that we experienced over the last 20 years with ISR and understanding how that is applied to the battle space. And if we get it right or better, I think that's probably a more modest ambition. Certainly the end user ground commander will have a lot better opportunity to be able to exploit these capabilities into their planning and into their day-to-day mission sets. I think I'll leave it there and very much look forward to any questions and some lively discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. Colonel Miller, if I may pass over to you.
So back in 1994, as a young lieutenant at U.S. Space Command studying orbital mechanics, my instructor was Navy Commander Garcia, who had spent time in Iraq explaining to General Schwarzkopf the basics of orbital mechanics, to which General Schwarzkopf told him, "I want that LEO imagery satellite parked over Baghdad," to which Commander Garcia explained that General Schwarzkopf did not have enough stars to stop that satellite from moving at its present speed. Now, I think we've come a little ways since then in the basic understanding of space by our senior commanders, but probably not a lot further. So as we move into multi-domain operations and we have to start focusing on those requirements, the first big problem that I see that has to be visualized is the counter-ISR fight. And for that, there are a number of components. The first is red ISR. You have to understand what red ISR is doing, what its capabilities are when it's overhead, which is virtually all the time these days. Second thing you have to understand is the gray ISR capabilities, which we have to assume everyone in the world has access to, and what those timelines are. And then we have to understand the comms networks that those data paths that the ISR data move across. And I think that is a specialized field that then has to be distilled down into explainable terms to the commander so that they can prioritize resources. after that. And so that's its own conundrum that I don't see being addressed. So for instance, the Army has been working on various problems, dealing with multi-domain before it was ever called multi-domain for a good 20 years now. But what we haven't addressed are the real needs of the counter ISR fight. And that's what I see as the next big challenge for visualization. The second aspect of it, of course, to synthesize what Colonel Thompson and Mr. DeCarbo have said, is basically you have to be able to get down to the basics of what happens with all the Blue Force capabilities with your load shed plans and everything that has to happen as resource constraints kick in on a battlefield. So with respect to that, the visualization has to be able to manage Blue Comms assets as the #1 priority. There are certain tools out there that do some of that, like the Joint Space Tactical Planner that we have in the US Army. And then there are variations of that within the community, like EWPMT that can be used partially on the targeting side. But there is no comprehensive tool that will do all of this. It could be that there shouldn't be a comprehensive tool, that the refinements are too restrictive, but generally, the tools themselves are going to become the focal point for how that's going to facilitate the commander's decision-making process for situational awareness and prosecuting the battle overall and counter ISR specifically.
Thank you very much indeed. Over to you, Sean.
Yeah, I think most of my sandwiches have been eaten, if I'm absolutely honest. You seem to have covered off most of the points here. I think what I'll do is just try and sum up, and I'll sum up using a bit of a vignette. So I've largely worked in sort of joint headquarters. Those joint headquarters have had multiple components, and so they're serving different requirements down to those individual components as well. But they're also made up of what we call staff branches, and those staff branches have different functions. So if we think about this, first of all, from the perspective of the commander, what's worrying the commander, and what is the commander really thinking about associated with this? He's ultimately trying to think about what effect it is that he can achieve on an adversary. That's what's interesting him, but also what effect can an adversary have on him? And so a way of visualizing that from the space domain would be great from him. If we then work through the other staff branches, so if we look at J6, which is looking at communications, for them, as has been highlighted, it's all about understanding the communications that you have at this moment in time, and indeed how those are likely to change over time. Now, much of our communications are delivered by space, but not all of it. And so again, integrating that with other ways of communicating, for example, 4G network, how is that represented in some way, shape, or form? So let's go to the J2, your intelligence analyst. And again, this was highlighted really neatly on the last one. Ultimately, that intelligence analyst is thinking about, well, what can I gain with respect to my situational awareness on the ground at this moment in time? And that's through multiple sensors. And again, what he's also interested in is what can the adversary see? And a way of presenting that would be key to them. From a J3 perspective, a J3 is all around about the sort of current ops and the current battle. For them, you can almost imagine a common operating picture that's presenting that common picture to them. Although, as I'm trying to describe here, it's not a common picture. It's a tailorable picture, almost like a sort of an overlay for each of them, providing that information. And then, of course, I'll talk about sort of the J5. So our J5 function is our future plans, thinking about what it is you might want to achieve in the future. How does that tool present what it is that can be achieved in the future so that can be understood from a space perspective as you think about planning of your operations? The other bit that sort of really interests me with all of this as well is, if you can visualize all of this, then you can probably optimize it. And that optimization is not best done by things like me, i.e. people. Ultimately, perhaps thinking about the future, and then the next step on from here is probably thinking about how do we optimize that information using machine learning and indeed algorithms. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Sean. And last but certainly not least, Mitch.
Thank you, sir. first, I'll adamantly agree with all my panelists and their points to it, and I won't try to rehash those for the sake of time, but try to pile on to my few little caveats. As Colonel Belmont mentioned, the education piece for many operators is still not at the level that we wish it would be for space. So using the common operating picture or visualization tool for operators forward deployed to be able to understand the electromagnetic spectrum that is being denied to them or is available for them to pass information and receive information would be an awesome capability to be able to gain. It does not need to be a complex model that is available. It can be extremely simplistic, and using an augmented intelligence algorithm to be able to show if you can transmit or receive on this frequency, this wavelength, to be able to gain information would be a great asset that could be used in the field. And on top of that, for them to be able to, at a micro to macro and reverse level, be able to see what is going on in the electromagnetic spectrum, to understand how you can navigate through a certain terrain to gain certain tactical and operational advantages, utilizing space capabilities to depict that would be an extremely helpful model to be able to display both in current and near-term operations. For example, if you were a tank brigade that was being jammed by something that could be shown to you of, here's the bubble that you're being jammed over, but if you move 2 kilometers to your east, you'll have an open line of communication. So that would be my couple piggybacks onto what the other panelists have already noted to this point. And with that, I'll hand it back over to our panel lead.
Thank you, Mitch. And I'm very conscious, whilst I was struggling with Zoom, I suspect my kids behind me just switched on Frozen 2, and so I'm struggling with bandwidth, but continue to fight through. Certainly, just a quick introduction. Lieutenant Colonel Jim Cheeseman. I'm the desk lead for space capability within Army headquarters. I'm a generalist, you'll be happy to hear, as will become blatantly apparent over the next half an hour. But I very much stand on the shoulder of giants. I have subject matter experts in cyber, PNT, SATCOM, and intelligence and surveillance reconnaissance that work for me. It's my job really to hear all of those capabilities. What's Army looking at? I'm conscious of time. Simplistically, we don't care too much about what satellites are out there. Predominantly, we care about the effect on the ground, and I'm trying to answer questions that are popping up to left of me as I do this. So really, and I think it's reiterated what other people have said, the effect is more important than actually how many satellites are up there and what they're doing. Second and final point for me is really I would trying to answer another question is, we aim certainly within the British Army for a singular information environment that is, free, secure, accessibility, and exploitable data everywhere, right from the tactical edge back to the UK. So hopefully that answers another question about who actually needs this space data, so to speak. So that is everyone and anyone, right from the tactical edge, the guys on the ground back to UK. We all reach back into this one version of truth. I certainly do not wish any specific and special space pipeline down to an Army headquarters that can't be shared out. Right, that's certainly from me. Okay, if we now move on, starting off with Sean. Sean, what keeps you from achieving your objectives at the moment?
Well, that's a really good question. So, I mean, there are a number of things. You'll often read about our procurement processes, and indeed that's reported often within the press. We are starting to get a little bit more innovative in terms of how we get after some of this, and really trying to draw it through at a little bit more pace. But that would probably be the first thing that I would raise with respect to the challenge. I think the other bit that I would highlight as well is, we have a number of legacy information feeds and a number of legacy data feeds. All of these need to be drawn upon in some way, shape, or form. So there are many technical challenges associated with how we progress forward. And I'll pause there.
Thank you, Sean. And I deliberately picked on Sean to start off with because I think it's worth highlighting, certainly within the UK. Sean is our joint user for space. So whilst the Army, the RAF, and the Navy will have their wishes, their requirements, what we do is we try to pass them in through Sean up at Strategic Command, and allows him to be impartial and effectively get the best for defence. Can I do the same question? What keeps you from achieving your objective? Can I go over to Mitch, please?
Yes, sir. So the biggest thing is it's almost what Lieutenant Colonel Lamb had said. It's integrating those legacy systems with the current cutting edge systems and taking all of those that are decades separate of technology, merging them into a common operating system that can speak the same computer language or on the same wavelength, and being able to digest that information in a way that the common operator that is not a space expert, that is not a technology savant, can understand it in real time. So it's gaining that augmented or artificial intelligence apparatus that will be able to parse out the megabytes, terabytes, gigabytes of data and present what the operator, commander, strategic leader needs to know at that time.
Mitch, thank you very much. Moving on, a question, Mark. As I'm fighting through Zoom at the moment, broadband connectivity, what are you doing to try and sort of fight through the issue at the moment? And is it working?
Thanks, Carl. So yeah, the intelligent voices that have been coming up have been prompting me to raise something which actually touches on something Colonel Lamb and Colonel Belmont both mentioned earlier on. And I think it's a recurring theme is the way in which we take the data feeds in, conduct the analysis we need to conduct, and then pass that on in a usable time fashion, and getting that through to the ground commander in this case, but any supported commander in a relevant timeline is critical. Currently, we have a satellite warning service which is provided. It's slightly what you call mandrolic, slightly clunky. It's more or less on-demand sort of service, rather than being something which is presented and taken as rote, which is what people need. And so what hasn't happened is the development of an organic satellite warning service within commands, mostly because it's a manpower and training burden and cost development burden for them. But it's the sort of thing that would enable the timeliness to articulate those threats of red ISR flying over your area of operations, for example, more timely. So there are various systems which we have which enable us to do this, but they don't talk to each other in a particularly intelligent way. The data isn't shared particularly well across various services, various components, certainly not very clearly across coalition either. So that's probably the main problem that we're facing.
Thank you, Mark. And again, if I could same question to Colonel Miller, how are you getting around the issue at the moment?
So our two big problems, the first one goes back to what everybody has already said about requirements. And within the Army, we have a real inability to articulate the need for what these common operating pictures and these visualization tools need to be able to do. That is what I would call the first big problem. Then it manifests itself further down the pipeline in terms of the gap between users and builders. And so I think the worst example is the Air Force. You look at, they spend $1 million a month on their common operating picture tool for space, and they can't use it. They call us all the time to use our tool, and we spent less than $1 million building the whole thing. And it's still functioning. But the problem we have internally is the Army doesn't recognize the tool as functional. So we don't support our own tool that everybody else needs. So there's a common operating picture that needs to be established that Major Belger has articulated, I think, quite well. There's an inability within the Army to understand the requirements, and then there's a refusal to fund it after that. So, everybody has Moses and the prophets, and they should heed them. The answers are all right in front of us, but nobody's really comfortable with their knowledge of the systems to commit the funding necessary to solve the problem. And that's where I see the main issues within the Army.
Thank you, Colonel. And look, conscious of time, before I hand it over to the suppliers for questions, are there any other comments people would like to make before I open up for the suppliers? No, okay. So Brandon, help me out here. How are we getting the questions in?
Yeah, so we had a few questions come in through the Q&A, and I will pose them to the panel, and whoever wants to jump in and answer, you feel free to do so. So the first question is, what is the smallest force element, ship, battalion, component commander, etc., that you envisage having direct access to the tool rather than a PowerPoint output of the tool, for example?
Brandon, I hope I've already answered that on behalf of the UK. Can I pass it over to Tony? Did you have the same view that actually everyone should be able to access it?
Yes, Colonel, thank you. I agree 100%. It should be tailorable down to 4 or 5 gents in the field, if you will. The smallest force available should be able to access the information. I mean, if we're sending special forces or other forces in for personnel recovery or hostage rescue or whatever we're doing, those folks need to know what ISR assets are available, be able to request ISR assets. So it has to be to the smallest unit that we are able to deploy effectively. I agree, Colonel. Thank you. Over.
Carrying on, there is one of the questions here about how would this be integrated into strategic operations in space and the appetite for virtual reality and augmented reality platforms. And I suspect it varies very much so depending on where you are. Are you sort of down in the mud or are you back at headquarters? If I can pass to Luke, please, just to get a view from sort of how would he like this information accessible?
Well, it's a really, really challenging question, especially with the virtual reality slant on it. So thank you very much for that, Jim. I think again, it depends on the level of command and where you're situated. It depends on whether you'd want that sort of capability in the virtual aspect of it to be able to explore it and be immersed in those capabilities and those locations in space. But I think from a tactical user, so I'm talking individual up to team to brigade level, I think a deployable system based on a battle management application system would be really useful. And then I mentioned about it being almost like personable to the individual or to the unit. I think we've got to be very alive to the capability that it's the effect that it can deliver. And so we've got to be very specific on, we've got a battle management application system that we can look at as a tactical soldier on the ground, and he's interested in these 3 effects or capabilities, and that's predetermined and pre-programmed into that system. Those capabilities will be different to potentially a J6 or G6 in a divisional headquarters that is looking at where he can get best communications, and therefore that the types of effects and what it can deliver will need to be tailored. And in that sort of divisional headquarters context, that battle management system could look different, a different form and similar sort of function, but a different form type. So clearly it can be bulkier, it can be different, but again, depending on your usage and what you need that capability to deliver for you, or to determine the form in which that takes.
Thank you, Luke. Mitch, if I could pass over to you, how would you like this information displayed?
So not to jump on to how the ground fighter would use it, but if you're talking into a orbital warfare type of situation where you have objects moving at thousands of miles an hour, closing speeds very rapidly at times, and it's hard to picture the massive domain that space now encompasses, to be able to visualize that in a 3 and 4 dimensional aspect. Any enhancement with that at a simplistic level would be an amazing tool for operators to use at any time. And I'm sure that Tony could probably elaborate on this better than I am doing from his position in the CSPOC, with that sort of management that they often run into and do and have been doing over the last 13 years as they transition from the JSPOC to the CSPOC. But that type of a capability for a strategic leader would be using augmented and artificial reality could prove to be quite beneficial at times.
Thank you, Mitch.
Sure.
Tony, do you want to jump in there?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Mitch, you've really hit on the key here. And I want to go back to a comment that Lieutenant Colonel Lamb made earlier. We're using the term common operational picture. And he's right. It's not a common picture that everyone uses. It's a tailorable visualization based on a common set of data standards. So at the CSPOC, we will have a certain level of information or visualization to make decisions to redirect assets or to conduct the combined operations as we do. But people in the field need a different visualization based on the same data standards, the same data sets. And I think there was a question about data standards or standard data, but the point is, and I mentioned this yesterday, it's all about having access to a standard data set and having that data have common data standards so we can tailor that visualization. Someone also mentioned in real time or near real time, and that's critical as well. So I think I've said enough.
Thank you, Tony. I noticed there's a question about we're focusing very much on the warfighter rather than the rest of the chain. If I could just put that one, certainly from the Army's perspective, is as Tony's alluded to, this one source of truth and the ability to plug into it to get that information. Be you the warfighter, the logistic guy, the signaler, everyone pretty much throughout, right back to the UK or the US, being able to get to that one source of truth. Mark, can I pass over for the RF view on that?
Yes, thank you. I think you're absolutely right. And to us, I think we're going to probably going over old ground again, because I think we're quite comfortable with the idea that the dependent user will be, that the form that this will take will be entirely dependent on the user's role and what they need to achieve that role. So down to the tablet situational awareness tool, which has a combinator operating picture on it, which incorporates a space layer based on the same data, all the way up to the very fancy spinning globe, which you don't want anywhere else except in your headquarters, just for the sake of something showy, but it isn't actually in any way useful, to be able to actually draw conclusions from. So I think you're probably right that it does stretch across all aspects of it, and that's the great thing about the space capabilities, is that it tends to operate on a global scale by virtue of its domain. So it adds that dimension to it inherently anyhow.
Thank you, Mark. I think we're slowly sort of shooting away these questions. Colonel Miller, could I ask you to have a go at Adam Page's question? I can't say it seems to be spread over a lot of technical domains that require a broad coalition of service providers all feeding into this system. What is your MVP, minimal viable product, for this as a single most important capability needed to build on?
Right, so they're all listed in terms of requirements. You know, you gotta prevent information overload. That's the first thing. Whatever echelon I've worked at, information overload has been the #1 problem. And we see that as the emerging problem for the I2Qs battalion. TSAG is gonna have the same problem. How to manage the information has gotta be the top priority. The second is how to display the priority. It's gotta be visual. And you know, you hear the same problems about PowerPoint. Oh, everything's too distilled. You know, you don't get into the depth of anything. But there's a reason PowerPoint's still out there. You move a lot of data in a very short amount of time and short amount of space, you know, with those slides. It's got to be that level of performance in terms of data display and readability. The third thing is I'm going to disagree with some of the things put out about pushing things down to the lowest level. Decisions in space really don't get below division in the United States Army. So the FA-40 on division staff is probably as low as the information needs to flow in terms of how far down the chain, because those decisions, anything at brigade, we talk a good game about how brigade is the operating center of gravity of the Army. It's just not true. The division staff is where all those decisions are going to be made. So it's got to be functional at division staff. And those are the things. And the fourth thing is it's really got to be able to facilitate decision making. And and there are ways to test that. And if it doesn't do that, then the system's probably going to fail.
Thank you, Colonel Miller. I've noticed one final question. I think we've got time. Would a chatbot be suitable? As an example, hey, when's the next enemy ISR spinning round? And can I pass that question to Sean, please?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So, I mean, we talk an awful lot about human-machine teaming, and I think the need to be able to get that interface between the human and the data and the information is absolutely key. So you've heard about the sort of tailoring and really making it relevant for the commander and for the decision maker. And those are at different levels and fulfilling different roles. So I think, you know, again, we often talk about, and it's been talked about here in terms of PowerPoint. You know, PowerPoint is the way to get that through. And I agree with that. But there are indeed situations where something just displayed as text is probably appropriate. And I think we also want to be mindful that our networks are limited. Certainly here in the UK, we are not blessed with infinite bandwidth, as Jim has demonstrated for us very well today, to be fair. And so, you know, if we can get that little bit, that little nugget that individual needs to support that decision on the effect that they are trying to achieve, and that comes through in text, brilliant.
Great. Well, look, noting the time, if I can sum up, I suppose, 3 points that I think we're all in agreement here, is firstly, there needs to be a single point of truth. You know, everyone must have to access, and I'll talk about the access in the second point, but you know, we can't have silos here. We need this, certainly the UK term is single information environment. Second point is scalable. We've discussed, if you're down in the mud, actually you could get overloaded with what's pushed. And it doesn't necessarily need to be pushed. You probably actually put in information if you are down in the mud. Scalable right back to the homeland, a bit at UK or the US, where actually you've probably got the time to have that much more information. So single point of truth, scalable. And I think the final one is that for the warfighter, the guys and the girls on the ground, it's the effect that we are more concerned about, rather than exactly where the actual satellites are. Well, hopefully on that point, thank you very much for your perseverance, especially the first 5 minutes as I was trying to get comms. But I'll pass back over to you now, Jake.
Thank you. Really excited about all the information that was shared. I thought we had some great questions. I want to let everybody know that this was really a brief introduction from a range of stakeholders inside the US and UK that are close to this problem again. What we want to do is we want to find companies that are developing innovative solutions that are relevant to these challenges. And with this introduction today, you feel like there is relevance and there is a fit, and you want to position the UK Ministry of Defense or the US DoD as an early adopter of those solutions, we want to be a good customer. And you can submit proposals in through the DASA competition available at the website. Companies that are invited to pitch at Pitch Day will be able to participate in a couple of design sprints that we will have more intimate, iterative, one-on-one feedback from a range of stakeholders, so we can talk to you about what you're doing, what it looks like, and how it fits the needs that we have. A valuable experience for any company that's looking to work with us as a customer. So again, the next step would be to register for the program, submit a proposal, and all of this information is available on our website. We'll be starting another panel focused on Challenge 3 in the next hour, and we'll have additional stakeholders and hope to see everybody on there to join for that. Brandon?
Yes, thank you, Jake. And thank you everyone for participating on this panel today. The discussion was great. And, you know, it's a testament to see how much of the coalition logged on today to share their thoughts, both on the US, on the UK side, and how all the different users were able to give their inputs on the challenges that they're facing and what they're looking for. So great discussion. Truly happy to have everyone on, and look forward to having everyone that participated today continue to be part of the Allied Defense Accelerator and helping push to get technology for coalition use cases. With that being said, just a reminder, it is a different link for the next webinar that starts at the top of the hour, so just in a few minutes. You will need to log off this particular link and then log into the next one. And we will open the room shortly once we get all the panelists up. And then, of course, our upcoming events. So this is the final webinar for this week. And then next week, we start again on Tuesday the 4th with the next webinars for Challenges 4 and 5. And then Challenge 6 later in the week. And then 2 weeks from now, we will have a more in-depth webinar, which not focus on the challenges as much, but actually bringing more, a deeper dive into how to work with the UK MOD and how to work within the UK if you're an international company, and then likewise for the United States. So we're going to have a variety of speakers talking about investment readiness, transition confidence, and international considerations for those particular topics. So with that, I would like to thank everyone for joining this morning. And if you guys are interested in the next challenge, we'll see you in a few minutes. Thank you.